Before I start anything, I do want to apologize for the late upload. My birthday was on Wednesday. Birthday. Anyway, to celebrate, for myself at least, I wanted to talk about some of my favorite DIYs to do. If you've seen any of my previous videos on OC crafts and activities, you know I love a good DIY, and oftentimes that includes keychains of some sort. So I just wanted to go down the line and discuss a bunch of the different ways that you can make keychains at home without having to go about purchasing some. So all of these are DIY handy. You're going to need some sorts of materials, and I'll be listing them as we go on, and they'll be like right on the side if you ever need them. So yeah, I did want to kind of do a rating list of each of these, and there's a little bit of criteria that I'll have going about doing this. Is it convenient? Is it sturdy? Is it costly? Basically. And try and find the best DIY keychain out there for people to make. Of course, all of my opinions are subjective, and the main purpose of this video is to just put those out there. Getting into the video now. This first one is a little bit difficult if you don't have the resources or locations to purchase these types of things. Shrinky Dinks are very straightforward, but I think they require a little bit of either money or additional resources to do, because again, you do have to buy Shrinky Dink sheets. If not, you're going to need to find very specific plastic to be able to make Shrinky Dinks. I think it's type 6 plastic, do correct me if I'm wrong, and a lot of people don't exactly have that on hand. In my case, it's very convenient to make because I live close to a Daiso and it's really just a bus ride away, and it can get pretty costly. Daiso's prices have gone up to $2.25, I believe, so that's around maybe $1 per sheet depending on which variant you buy. But I do think they are the sturdiest out of the other keychains that I'm going to be discussing here. So, you know, it is a win some lose some situation. It's all up to how sturdy you want this keychain to be, and I think in a lot of ways they emulate the feel of a keychain in the manufactured sense. In terms of actually baking these, I found that my toaster oven at home works pretty well. I think an oven works just as well too. I know some people use heat guns, but I don't exactly have one on hand, so I can't vouch for that. So there are a bunch of needed materials for this, and also extra precautions as you are dealing with melted plastic. You kind of have to be careful when you're doing this. Also, there's a very short time frame that I need to be doing these before the plastic and the parchment paper tend to melt together and then make the actual thing blurry. You kind of see that here in the clips that I show. And there's also the added liability that they might not bake right and flip over and melt into themselves. And unfortunately, that was the case for one of my keychains. But again, I do think if they are done right, that they last very long, and they're probably one of my favorite DIY keychains to do, but obviously this is out of the range for some folks. So in terms of convenience, I do say it's maybe like a 4 out of 10, unless you're close by to a place that has these, or you order them online, then it's kind of a difficult thing to do. Also, if you don't have an oven or a heat gun or a toaster oven, then this craft is also particularly difficult. I do think it is maybe like a 9 or 10 when it comes to sturdiness. I have a bunch of them that are on keychains I use very, very often, and so far they haven't chipped. They are very, very sturdy. I use one of them as a phone charm in particular. With how much I drop my phone and how many bumps I've taken with it, it stayed relatively the same. I haven't noticed any scuff marks, and I think it has around the same hardness and firm material that you would see from an acrylic keychain. Cost, I think it really depends, so I would put it like right in the middle at a 5 or 6. It is pretty costly depending on what material you're using and all the added things that you're going to need to make this craft in particular. It has its restraints. Second off, This one I haven't done before. This comes from a tutorial done by another very cool TikTok user, and I'll be linking their video and account in the description for you to look up yourself, and I think the tutorial that they made was very, very solid. So go check that out if you have the chance. But these are basically paper keychains. You draw out the design on paper, you put some firm or thin cardboard on the back, and then tape up the entire thing to seal it. In this video, put a little bit of my extra favorite sealant to use ever, Mod Podge. If you've seen any of my other DIY crafts, you know I love Mod Podge to death. Even though it wasn't entirely necessary here, you know, I still had to do it. It was very easy to make in comparison to some of these other ones that I've done in the past. I do think it's a little bit flimsier than some of the other crafts on here. Besides that, it still was pretty sturdy. I used one of them that I made right here in this video on my bag for like the entire day, and it lasted. I don't think there's any problems with it. I would have to test it when it comes to rain or anything wet, but I think with the tape sealing everything off, it wouldn't be too big of an issue. And in general, this is probably the most convenient DIY craft for keychains ever. It was really cool, and I had a blast with it. Now getting on to the rankings, I do think in terms of convenience, it's probably like a 9 out of 10. I think these are really easy, already existing materials that you can basically find anywhere. I used a Pop-Tart back for one of my keychains on this. Clear tape is pretty much anywhere. You can easily get it at a dollar store or whatever. I think this one's going to be the most convenient we're going to have on this list. I do think it will last pretty long if you're not bending it too much, but they are very flimsy in comparison to some of these other ones. Unless you're going through the jungle or something, it's going to last you pretty long, so I'd say maybe like a 6 or 7. Don't make that joke. Sorry, I've been going insane with the amount of 6-7 jokes in my household. Forgive me. Costs, I'd say this is an 8 or 9 too, because again, very convenient and you don't really need to spend that much on the materials that you need for this craft in particular. And I highly recommend it. I will have the original creator in the description for you to follow their tutorial, as it's very digestible. And moving on, these last two I've done separate videos on, and I'll be linking some of those in the description because they were much better attempts than the ones that I'm going to provide here. I ran out of hot glue, so whoopsies! This craft is just a hot glue gun keychain. It's kind of similar to the process on the previous one, but instead of using tape as your sealant, you're using hot glue on both sides. This one is a little bit tedious just because you're working with hot glue. If you lay it on too thick, then the actual design underneath gets really muddled. I usually go over it with a pen to make the design pop out. Still, unless you really know what you're doing, then it's kind of difficult to do. You will need parchment paper to make sure it doesn't stick to the weights that you're going to be putting on it to flatten all the hot glue out. Also, if you run out of hot glue, you're gonna have a lot of holes in it, and unless you have a sealant, then you're toast. So for these crafts, I would recommend that you use a smaller keychain scale than a very large and ambitious one that I'm doing here, because I ran out. Don't do what I did, basically. And again, you probably are going to have to go over what you've already done multiple times if you didn't put enough hot glue. Front and back hot glue, press it down, and that's the entire craft. I don't know if a lot of people have hot glue at their house though. I have a family of crafters, so I have hot glue on hand most of the time. This was the one exception. So in terms of convenience, I'd probably rate it maybe like a 7, because again, unless you have a crafter household or you have hot glue guns on hand, then it's probably not going to be as convenient as some of the other ones, but I do think hot glue is a lot easier to find than Shrinky Dink sheets. So sturdiness, I do think these ones are really, really sturdy. Hot glue, when it's properly done and sealed entirely, the paper isn't going to get wet, and it doesn't move as much as the paper keychain. It does have the same or similar feel to a Shrinky Dink or acrylic keychain. It is a little bit bendy, but besides that, it's really hard to tear in and mess up. So probably similarly 8 or 9. And finally, cost. Again, I think it really depends. You can find hot glue for pretty cheap at a dollar store, so I would put that at a 6, just in terms of cost. This last one, unfortunately, I don't have any clips of because I don't have any metal at home for me to use for this. I usually use soda cans, and that can get pretty dangerous, so again, I would recommend some precautions when we're doing these. But I have separate videos where I've done it in the past, and besides that, I think it's really simple. Just 3 materials, but it can get pretty dangerous, and it is very inconvenient if you don't know what you're doing. Do what's necessary to keep yourself safe when you're doing these crafts in particular. But yeah, all you're really doing is cutting out the sheets of paper, then cutting out the metal sheet to match that, and boom, there's your keychain. I usually seal it with a bunch of Mod Podge, but I think you can use tape as an alternative here. I do think it's very convenient if you have a lot of metal cans around your house. My family does a lot of soda drinking, so we always usually have metal lying around, so I think it's a really neat way to be resourceful and make something cool out of them. They can get a little flimsy at times, if not, you know, dented or creased, depending on how well you're doing them. But they are pretty sturdy, again, compared to maybe the paper keychain. The way that I was doing the loopholes at the time with the soda tabs just wasn't working. They just keep falling off, and I have to keep gluing them back together again, and then they fall off again. So, you know, in terms of convenience, I'd rate it a good 6.5. Okay, we're getting into the halves section right here. If you do have a lot of metal on hand, then, you know, it's nice, but it's also pretty inconvenient in terms of the actual, like, process itself. It is going to dull your scissors over time the more that you do these types of crafts, because again, you're working with metal and cutting it out. Be a little cautious when you're doing these. That's why I wouldn't rate it as high. It's sturdier than paper, but I don't think as sturdy as a hot glue gun keychain. So a 6.5 again. Costs, I do think that this is pretty cost effective and very resourceful in the case that you have a lot of cans lying around. I'd say an 8. It's always nice to have a way to reuse your waste. Yeah, that's all for keychain tutorials out there. Helpful links will be in the description. Each keychain has its own pros and cons. It's up to you and your preferences on which ones that you want to do. Convenience, definitely go for the paper keychains. And if you want something more sturdy, I'd say lean towards the hot glue gun keychain or the Shrinky Dinks. Those ones are really sturdy and will last you pretty long. But yeah, I think these are really neat and a nice alternative to manufactured keychains if you don't have the opportunity to purchase them for yourself. And I don't know. I hope these were helpful. That's all. Bye.